Good afternoon, and welcome to the February 16th meeting of the General Plan Advisory Committee. We will begin our meeting with a moment of silence, please. Okay, thank you very much. Let the record notice that we do have a quorum and the meeting is called to order. And if you would rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have a moment set aside here for GPAC announcements. Are there any announcements from any members of the advisory committee? Seeing none, then we will move on to public comment. And this is a time set aside really for anything that you'd like to say to the committee. So please come forward, give us your name, and we'd love to hear from you.
Testing. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Carol Truesdale. I've been here since 1995. Dear General Plan Advisory Committee, Scott Graham et al. At the last GPAC meeting held on January 19th, Mr. Ed Griggs presented to this committee and Planning Department proof that the legend of the land use map North Morro Bay area PDF in page 62, figure LU14, was an error for the area known as the Fuel Tank Demolition Panorama Project. This site was originally zoned in 1988 General Plan as R1. However, the documentation currently circulating shows this land as R2. Ed brought up this issue to Mr. Graham, Morro Bay Planning Department, and GPAC members. Mr. Graham stated that it was a mapping error and he would make the correction accordingly. When I requested the updated map for figure LU1 from the Morro Bay Planning Department, I offered to pay for the map, and Mr. Graham was very kind to give me a few free because he had some extras. I noticed the correction was not made. This concerns me because this information was presented to the citizens at GPAC meeting on February 2nd for the third community involvement meeting regarding existing general plan land use map without corrections being made. I've included a copy of Mr. Griggs' letter to the GPAC team as well as a map I received from Mr. Graham. We're at a critical threshold in completing our general plan, and I firmly believe that information needs to be correctly included. So I'm going to give this to you to Mr. Teft right here. Thank you very much. I made it. Not my 3-minute warning, right?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, members of the GPAC and Planning Commission, our City Planning Commissioners. I've been asked by Annie Pavarsky, who is ill, I think she's at the doctor at this moment, to present her views, and I agreed to do that. I'll present her exact words, and it will be her view that I'll be presenting. Annie says, I am concerned with the options Morro Bay is considering regarding the general plan and the future of the city. One option that has not been considered is unincorporation. I have certainly thought about it in view of Morro Bay's management, crumbling infrastructure, and the various proposals for development. We're talking about expanding the sphere of influence, SOI, possibly annexing county land, which would extend services to those areas and the city, bearing the costs for water, roads, police, fire, etc. I do not support this. We don't have the funds to support what we do have. Roads and sewers in disrepair, possible zoning changes to increase density that will bear costs and traffic in areas with already failing systems and no money or plans for repairs. The city cannot manage what it has now, and we're to trust that management will change if we expand. I believe the land being considered for inclusion in the SOI should remain zoned ag and within the county jurisdiction. In addition, Any discussion of the development should include senior housing for many current and future retirees. Growth is inevitable. Please do continue to solicit ideas from citizens of Morro Bay, rather than hiring more expensive consultants to do this. Why the rush to adopt a plan with so many unanswered questions and concerns, as well as maps that do not accurately reflect land use? For example, the error on page 62, land use map, North Morro Bay, figure LU-14, has remained uncorrected, though it was brought up to the attention of the committee and the planning department in January as being R1 rather than R2. We cannot afford any inaccuracies regarding so important a future. Thank you. Bye, Annie.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
My name is Larry Truesdale.
Very interesting. Great.
And Kodiak Street in Morro Bay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Victor Montgomery. I'm here on behalf of Chevron Corporation. And at your last meeting, I had told you that we were going to have a meeting between Chevron and several conservancy groups. We had that meeting. It was Monday the 13th. We met with the Trust for Public Lands, the Cayucas Land Conservancy, and the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo. We met with them to talk about options for the Chevron property that involve conservation and development and the search for the right mix of how those things could happen. At our last meeting, I also said I would bring back an alternative. At your last meeting, you had 3 different alternatives for the Chevron area. I just delivered to staff, because we just got it produced, we had to wait until Monday to get it done, an alternative map, actually 2 different maps that reflect Chevron's thinking about options that are available for dealing with the Chevron property, including leaving portions of it in the county, bringing part of it into the city, exchange of density, and those sorts of things. And I understand I only have this 3 minutes this evening, so I just wanted to say here are the maps. We're happy to talk with staff or talk with your committee more this evening if you're interested. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Robert Walker. I live 523 Whidbey Street. Feel like I'm a little redundant. The 2 previous speakers have actually touched on the 2 items that I think are really important. The first is the correction of the map listed, and it's actually listed as existing general plan map. It may, from the whole project point of view, it may seem like a small thing, but if it doesn't get corrected, it gets published, it becomes essentially law. And so I think it's really important that the panorama, 3300 panorama, which shows a density that wasn't there originally, I really believe that needs to be changed. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Reviewing the alternatives, and I got to say, I'm just overwhelmed with the amount of planning. The document's just like, wow. So I focused at home. I live on Whidbey, okay? And so I look at what's being proposed, and I've got to say, I'm really confused about why we're taking on a study area that essentially extends to South Cayucas. It's kind of mind-boggling. It's been expressed in a lot of different ways. We've got issues here, and I think we need to focus on here. Specifically, the parcels that surround the northern boundary of the city's limits. It's parcels 33, 34, 36, 38, 40, and 41. I really don't understand the logic of why that should be included in an SOI. I've had a couple discussions, and people say, well, so we can control it. honestly, I think it ought to stay in the control of the county, because they're not motivated to extend residential development. And I think there is a groundswell locally. And if you go up there, just take a drive around and look at those hills. They're unstable. General knowledge is that residential development doesn't pay for the extension of services. So we're at the upper end of our whole network of water and sewer, and we're going to turn around and try to develop that particular area. So in my opinion, I really believe that ought to stay in the county as an agricultural use. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name's Kristen Hedlund. I live at 498 Yerba Buena, and I would agree with the last three speakers. I live across the street from 3300 Panorama Drive, the jet fuel tank. Last meeting, GPAC meeting, we discussed that the lot was zoned on the map as R2 when it should be R1. And I would like to ask that that be corrected and that it be made public so that we are sure that the correction has been made before everything is final. And I want to thank you for all your time and energy and reviewing the general plan. I know it's a lot of work, and I would just like to make sure that that property gets R1. Thank you so much.
Okay. Anyone else who would like to speak at this time? If not, then I will ask if there are any questions from the commission for any of the speakers or comments before we close public comment.
It sounds like we haven't changed that designation. Is that just didn't get in the pipeline?
The land use designation for that property is medium density? Is medium density.
Okay.
We're not talking zoning.
Right.
Zoning R1, R2, R3, I'm not talking about that. So the way we have it, I think, depicted on the map that was submitted back to you, I think is correct. In the land use map, and that's currently medium density, as is the rest of the property up in that area of town. So it's accurate based on the current documents that we have today. So, and again, zoning R1, R2, R3 is something else. And we're not there yet.
The zoning on that property is, I'm sorry.
Can you speak to what the numerous people talked about? They specifically talked about R1 and R2. I understand what we're supposed to be discussing, but can you address their concerns about that?
That's all open for discussion as part of the general plan update process. But right now, there's been no intent or direction from this body or any input that we've gotten from outside of this to change it to anything other than, to have it be anything other than R1, which is what it's currently zoned. So it's zoned R1 right now. Its land use is medium density. Yes, there's a disconnect between those two, but it's medium density for that entire area of town.
Okay. The other thing, and I've seen some chatter about this on Nextdoor Morro Bay too, I think, and here's my understanding. Chevron has property for sale. It is in the county at this point in time. Even if Morro Bay were to decide to put it under our sphere of influence, we do not own that land. We do not provide services for that land. What that does for us is give us a seat at the table. The county could choose to keep it as agricultural land. They could also choose, because Chevron's selling it, to people who might want to develop it, right? I mean, so I'm just sort of expressing my understanding of what's going on. So anybody who buys that land could say, yeah, I want to do ag, but they could also say, I want to put a development there. If it's only under county purview, we may have some input, but our input doesn't quite have the weight as if we had it in our sphere of influence where we said, we want a place at the table when those discussions are happening. So is that kind of?
It's kind of, it would also be less likely that that the county would be interested in pursuing those types of land use changes outside of someone coming to the city, because we've said that's an area that we'd be interested in annexing. And in our general plan, it tells us what we want it to be: agriculture or one house, right? And what we're really probably interested in, what we've been talking about to this point, is maybe directing where that house might go on those properties. Because right now, they could be at the top of those properties, which they'd be really visible from behind the city. And I think what we're interested in is preserving the backdrop of the city in that location. And so really that's sort of where this conversation started. I mean, some of you may have other, opinions or ideas about that, but that's sort of my take on it.
Well, I guess the first thing is, though, it does not obligate us to do anything as far as providing services, right? That was my understanding as well.
Not unless we annex it into the city, correct?
Right, but just declaring it as a sphere of influence doesn't obligate us to do that.
No, but when you do, so this is probably worth noting. If we do put something in our sphere of influence, someone that owns one of those properties could go directly to LAFCO and submit their application to have it annexed into the city. And they don't necessarily have to come through the city to get a second okay. This already says that we'd be interested in that and we'd be willing to provide the services to that based on the land use that's there. Meaning LAFCO could say it could come in, but it's going to be the agricultural, say, zoning on it that allows for the one house that can't be at the top of the lot, because that's what our policies would say for the pre-zoning for that land.
But on the other hand, putting it into the sphere of influence and putting it into the general plan would offer us the opportunity to say, okay, yes, we realize that we're implying an intent to annex here, but when we annex it, it's going to be with these provisions.
Correct. They don't get to go to LAFCO outside of this process and say, here's our application for annexation. We want it to be R4.
Right.
The city says what the zoning is, and the city has it pre-zoned, basically. Has a pre-land use designation that tells the story. That's what this is about, telling the story about what we'd like to see back there and having maybe a little more control. Or if the city's not interested in it, then you can leave it to the county, and then it could be developed under county policies, which in that area again is one house. It just doesn't really necessarily limit where you can put it.
Yeah.
So another question on that, Scott. So if we say we take it in our sphere of influence, the buyer goes to LAFCO, gets it annexed, are we obligated to provide services at that time?
We would be saying as part of it being in the SOI that we'd be willing to do that.
Okay, so if it's not in the SOI, do we have any obligation, financial or otherwise, to what happens on that property?
Any obligation, meaning to provide water and sewer services,
exactly.
and those types of things?
Provide
no.
services.
The likelihood of who would be providing police and fire services, though, because we have a joint agreement with the county, would be the city of Morro Bay.
But in terms of utilities,
so even though it says we're not obligated to provide services, we probably would be providing those services because we're the closest response agency.
right. What about just basic
services.
Utilities? Do we have any obligation to provide them
No.
if they're not in our sphere of influence?
We do not.
Or if they are in the sphere of influence, we're obligated to provide utilities?
Yes, we'd be saying that we would be willing to provide utilities to those when they came in, based on whatever that development would be.
Okay.
Yeah, under the circumstances that we would have noted in our general plan, like you can come in, this is what you can put there, and we would be willing to provide the service that's to that development, which in this instance would likely be a house.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
Scott, a little bit extension of this discussion, but as they were talking about the misrepresentation of R1 and R2 in that specific lot, I was looking at the map that the gentleman from Chevron gave us, and it doesn't speak to SOI. It speaks to the red line he shows is proposed city boundary on both maps. So that's wrong.
This is their map.
Well, I understand.
And this is their map related to the negotiations that Mr. Montgomery referenced. It's not our map.
I understand that. I'm just saying this was just given to us to look at and to make, do some analysis of. But I guess I'm confirming with you that this is not correct. That when he says city boundary, that's kind of a euphemistic approach from their side, maybe, to think that it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really looked at this, but yeah, if it says city boundary,
it's on the legend down on the bottom.
City, CVS, yeah, that's things they've talked about. And we do have this shown in some of our land use options that you've already looked at. What? As proposed SOI, yes.
Okay.
One last comment, Scott. So in terms of the disparity between the land use plan and zoning and so forth, I think it would be helpful when we have public comment that the city or the consultants specifically reply to the questions and post it so that citizens know that or understand that, we get that, it's zoned wrong or it doesn't jive, we're going to change it at some point in time. Otherwise, people do go around thinking, I talked about this 3 times, the city hasn't done a thing, they're continually issuing documents that aren't correct, and I don't see that as necessary. So is that something you think you can do?
Well, I think,
Yeah, we could probably add it to
Or
some
put
of
it in the minutes or something,
Yes,
what do you think?
there's probably ways we can address that, yes.
so, let's just clarify it right now, right? Because let me make sure that what I'm hearing is correct. And so what you're saying is, on the land use map, this is correct. It is the land use designation is moderate density residential. But on
It's medium density residential, yeah.
No, it shows moderate. Yellow.
What was that? Oh, so that's the proposed one that's there. Yeah, okay. So that's one of the proposed land use changes for that location is to the moderate from medium.
Okay, so currently it is medium density.
It is currently medium.
Okay.
That moderate is a less dense land use designation.
But the zoning designation is R1.
Is currently R1, and then as you're aware, we haven't gotten into necessary zoning discussions for what would be in the future.
No.
Although the remainder of that area. So when you look at the land use map in the general plan right now, and you look at it and you're like, oh, that's medium density. And then you look at the zoning map, you're like, oh, it's R1. Well, it's R1 because there's a bunch of small lots there that have single-family houses on it, so they put a R1 classification on it.
Yeah.
Because there's one house per lot. So.
I know we're going to have discussions in the future as we get to it. I'm just trying to clarify what exists now. So it currently is zoned R1, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the zoning designation is really, to my reading, what determines what can be built on that property. In other words, when you go to the zoning ordinance and you want to see what you can do with your property, you go and look at what zone it's in. The land use designation doesn't really determine that.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So
Yeah, I think
I understand why there's confusion there.
There is significant confusion between land use designation and zoning.
And there always is. This is not something just because we're looking at it right now. This is something that's fairly pervasive, and that it's not to be unexpected that people would confuse the two, because they both deal with land use.
Okay. So then let me just, since we still have public comment open, let's just ask if there are any other questions about that, or if it's now clear.
I have one question, sir.
Well, right out of the plan itself is a table that shows the description of the land use, and then it has a column that says the equivalent zoning. Okay? This is out of your report. I just cut and pasted it right in here. If you go back to the existing plan, last revised 1997, it clearly shows that that parcel has the same land use classification as everything else around it.
That's correct. It does.
Okay.
That's exactly what it shows.
Okay, but the color code now on the new map shows it different than everything else around it.
On the proposed option?
Yes. No, this is the actual, I'm not talking about options, I'm talking about Panorama 3300, okay? So you need to speak to the microphone. I'm sorry, thank you. So on the map, on the previous plan, everything is identical. Whatever you decide it is, everything is identical. On the current map, the land use planning units have changed by color code.
Right, and we don't have a moderate density currently, do we?
Yeah, you do.
We do.
It goes low, moderate, and medium.
Moderate is R1. The low density is it would be equivalent to the RA zoning
Yes.
that we have.
And that's what the table shows.
Yeah.
So I'm still confused then, why is it different than everything else around us? That's really the issue. I mean, just look at the color zoning.
Just to clarify, you're speaking of Lot 33 only?
No, it's not even lot 33, it's in the property.
Here. It's not part of the Chevron.
This area here. When we were doing that reconciliation, that's how it ended up as medium, because one of the.
Well, medium is what it is now.
But that's not what he's saying. He's saying he has a map that says it's moderate. The corresponding designation.
Yeah, let me look at what you're saying. That would be helpful, thank you.
So I just cut and pasted this out of your report.
Right, so the map that we produced for the land use alternatives and, that we worked with you guys on says it's medium. But he's saying it says it's moderate somewhere else in the existing general.
It labels that map as the existing map, not a proposal.
Yeah, but this is the thing that we fixed.
No, it's not. That's what was.
I think it is. I think it's what we fixed.
So,
Do you have that map that Carol gave you?
yeah, that's it right there.
Yeah. So it is corrected. This is the map that we gave Ms. Trude.
Microphone.
All right. Okay. So here we go. So the map that Ms. Truesdale showed is actually the correct map and shows that as moderate density residential, which will eventually be R1. So this is the corrected map. This was the map that's here was the one that was identified, that you provided, was the one that was identified previously where we said, hey, that's incorrect.
Right.
We have to fix it. This is the map that fixed it. So,
But I was really confused about how you explained it, because I think you might have even gotten twisted up in the moderate and medium.
I won't argue the case. I apologize if I made it worse. So you can have your exhibit back. We are tracking the changes, and the intent was to have the land use be corrected, because it was pointed out in the exhibit that you have that it was wrong, and this was the fix, was to turn it to moderate, which will equate to the R1 zoning later on.
Super. Thank you. Thanks for the extra time.
Thank you for allowing open comment to continue. I appreciate it very much. This is a very important issue to us. And, so 3300 Panorama Drive is zoned R1. And that means that it is single-family residential. Is that correct?
The current zoning is that, yes.
Okay, so in the new general plan, is R1 going to be changed to possible single-family duplexes, townhouses?
We haven't gotten to that point yet. What we're dealing with is land use. Land use is not R1, R2, R3. Land use is currently is moderate density. Moderate, and then medium would be the higher density, which is what you were talking about. We're proposing to change it to that, and that's not where we're at, not what we've been talking about, and not what your neighborhood has requested.
Okay, so it's possible that you're going to increase the density?
It's not up to me. This is a public process, and we're not at zoning yet.
Okay.
So when it goes into zoning, there may be a bunch of folks that come out and say, yep, we want higher density, and then potentially it could be somewhat higher. I don't see that happening because it's not happened to this point. It's probably going to be R1. But that's not up to me.
Okay.
The council makes that decision.
Okay, we're just trying to get a clarification exactly the process. So
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay.
Scott, could you explain to the audience about this when in the process that we will discuss the zoning, or it won't even be us if it's going to be planning, so that they'll know to pay attention and come back so they can speak to that?
The General Plan Advisory Committee will see the land use portion in the zoning code update as well.
So
Yeah, you will be looking at that.
Can you give them an idea when, or at least, I guess, watch our agendas to know when it'll be coming back to discuss?
Looking at our consultant, looks like 2 or 3 months. We'll be bringing that forward.
Okay.
We have to get through the land use portion on the general plan. The zoning code implements that, and so you have a land use map for the general plan, and then the zoning maps R1, R2, R3 implement those. So we have to get the land use maps squared away first before we can go to that next step. Otherwise, we have two things moving at the same time, and that's not good. So.
Did you have a question?
No further questions.
Got it? Okay. In that case, are there any questions for the gentleman from Chevron while we still have the public comment open?
I had just a quick question on the land use along Highway 1. I had thought, and I apologize if I don't have this exactly right, but I had thought there was a visitor and commercial services sort of on the far side of the highway. And also, I was looking at that number 1 sort of in the northern end along the highway, and I'm wondering, is that also meant to be agricultural, or is that something else?
So we'll look at parcel number 1.
Yes, okay, so let's start with that. So parcel number 1, you got part of it on the west side of the highway.
Correct. Parcel number 1 is in the county, zoned agriculture, both sides of the highway.
Both sides of these agriculture. Okay, I couldn't quite tell on the color coding.
So then the next one's down on the west side of the highway. Since this is us talking about a potential vision that we see, we have designated it open area,
Okay.
which we interpreted to be open space, fundamentally.
Okay. And I thought that an earlier version of the map that we saw had some kind of commercial and visitor
We
services on
did.
that side.
We did have that in the
Okay.
prior version of it. We had commercial, visitor serving commercial, both sides of the highway. And we've been listening while we're trying to put these together.
Okay.
And there didn't seem to be a lot of support for commercial uses west of the highway.
Okay, so that would be open space then, continue to be open space. Okay. Thanks for the clarification.
I do have a question also, Vic. The difference between the city agriculture and the yellow areas on this map, are the yellow pieces currently, some of them already in the city, or are those are all based on your property?
That is our proposal.
Okay.
Our understanding is there is some interest in taking lots, for instance, 16, 35, 37, 39. Those are in the county, zoned ag, outside of the coastal zone. Those lots would be entitled in the county to 2 residences on each parcel. And you have the existing lots right along Panorama, 33, 34, 36, 38, 40, and 41. Each one of those is currently zoned ag in the county. Because they're in the coastal zone, they only get 1 house.
Yep.
What we're saying is, an idea we have is to take all of the entitlement from those lots and put it in the little narrow yellow strip that we've shown there. And that little narrow yellow strip would be, as our understanding, zoned R1 and require a 20,000 minimum square foot lot.
Okay, and my question about that yellow area, the little strip, is that currently Chevron property?
Yes.
Okay.
And does the dashed line along the edge of that little yellow strip, does that represent lot splitting? It's
just a way to define the little yellow area.
Okay, yeah. For purposes of zoning, it would eventually have to be split, correct? We wouldn't have split zoning on a lot.
I think
part of the zone. Yeah.
Eventually they're going to be
separated into
it would have to be annexed and subdivided and all
The
that
idea,
stuff.
I think, behind where they're going is so you move the density, conserve the rest. It would make sense then to put the lines in place and show us where the lots are.
And we committed, perhaps some more confusion, we went straight to the zoning, so there wouldn't be this question of what Chevron's intent is. We went straight to the zoning and said it's R1, and we put a note on there, 20,000 square foot lots, because we're trying to avoid this sort of mystical confusion of what we want. or what our ideas are.
Right.
Okay,
So we've been pretty pointed about it.
Okay, so for Lot 40, for example, what's allowed right now is one house on Lot 40.
Which lot 40, yes.
Okay, and so what you would do is take that edge of the lot, of this lot, zone it as R1 or whatever use residential
Right.
would be the land use. And so there would be several houses then would be allowed along.
Correct. There might be
border
2 or 3 houses there.
Okay, so
If you-
would that be something similar to what is in the neighborhood now, sort of similar kinds of housing? Is that?
No.
That's sort of the idea, is to
Okay.
push the density down there. If you're going to annex these into and you want to, and their idea is to preserve the backdrop, having them push down and be looking like the other houses that are over there makes a lot of sense versus further up on the slope that looks like they're disconnected and is sort of detrimental to that backdrop in view of the
So
city.
the idea, so the trade-off here is that instead of allowing only one house that could be placed somewhere on the lot that we might not want it to be, you'd allow more houses on the lot as long as they're pushed down further, is that?
Pushed down to the bottom, and the lots, let's be
And
clear.
they're still probably larger lots than what's normally in that
The lots
neighborhood,
along
actually.
Panorama
Yeah.
are below 6,000 square feet,
Yeah, I think
typically.
they're probably half that.
Yeah, 3,000.
Maybe.
We're proposing a minimum size of 20,000
Okay.
per lot.
Okay. All right, thanks for that clarification.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
What would happen to this proposal if the visitor serving commercial went away?
We'd be willing to talk about it. I don't want to put words in the conservation group's mouths. The most important thing, their first priority for conservation was Lot 1 and Lot 6.
Sure.
And there's a bunch of little Lot 6, 14, 13, 12, that little bunch in there. Those are their highest priority for conservation. We believe there's the opportunity, and it's a good site, for some other visitor serving use, be it a lodge or a campground or something like that, and that it has a higher and better use than just open space. Without impacting the highway views and those things, I would encourage to drive by there and look. There's existing buildings there, so you can see what the buildings are, the kind of impact they have now. Look closely. Stop and look back there. Behind the eucalyptus trees, so you've got the shore plant buildings, then there's some rows of eucalyptus trees. Behind those eucalyptus trees, there's a big area back there. It's almost 20 acres. You can barely see it. So we're saying there's some potential there for you to think about. And for the conservancy groups to think about as well. You know, it's one thing to conserve, it's another thing to be able to maintain the property long-term over time. That takes funds.
Yeah.
I just had one more clarifying question. When
Okay.
it says on Lot 9, this lot is not a part of ownership, what does that mean? Does that mean Chevron doesn't own it?
That's correct. Oh, Lot 9? Lot 9 is owned by Chevron. If you drive out Toro Creek Road, there's, on the left-hand side as you're going out, there's 3 little buildings sitting out in the middle of a field. Those little buildings are on Lot 9. Those are existing wells that Chevron owns, and they're going to keep.
Okay, but the rest of the land that's sort of in that corridor there, that's not owned by Chevron?
The ones that actually have this lot is not a part of ownership, was sold to the Cayucas Sanitary District.
Sanitary District, okay.
And that's the
okay.
same with both of those were sold to the Sanitary District.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. With that, then, we will close public comment, bring the meeting back to the committee, and move on to the consent calendar, which today consists only of the approval of minutes from our meeting of November 17th.
Copy from Vic.
Are there any comments, questions, or discussion on the minutes? If not,
Well, I don't know if it's the right time, but I wanted to make a comment on the agenda for today. That's incorrect. On item F, it speaks to the next meeting that's March 16th, and it should be March 8th. So the public would know that we have another meeting.
Yeah, I think we had the agenda available before we had confirmation that everybody was available to do the March 8th meeting.
Understand, I just want to take this opportunity,
Okay.
let everyone know
Okay.
we'll have a meeting March 8th, too.
Okay, good.
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor of approving the minutes as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Unfinished business, we have none today, so we will get down to our new business. This basically includes our continued discussion of opportunity sites and the downtown waterfront strategic plan, and I will directly turn it over to Jeff Henderson to begin this part of the meeting.
Thank you, Chair Teft. And I'm going to probably just disperse with the status update, not considerably different than our previous meeting, with the exception of the workshop that was recently held on these alternatives. I believe a number of you were able to attend that, and would welcome you sharing your feedback on that during discussion at the end of the meeting. So our order of business for this evening, actually, I'll go back up. Our order of business for this evening, at the committee and the chair's discretion, our priority would be to finish the discussion of the opportunity sites if possible tonight.
Sure.
And maybe begin some discussion on downtown waterfront strategic plan if time allows. That's part of the reason we also scheduled March 8th, is so that we make sure we've got a good block of time to get through both of these materials. So I think for all of us, our priority this evening ought to be on concluding the discussion on the opportunity sites. Primarily, that is because we're also attempting to secure a Planning Commission City Council joint meeting at the end of March, where we would present that material in order for the project to continue momentum and move forward.
Jeff, can I interrupt here? I wasn't at the last meeting, but the prior meeting, I know we're cramming in a lot of stuff, but I sure would ask that we respect items D, E, and F, that we get to cover those items, that you close early enough to allow us to do that.
Understood. Okay. So again, we're just continuing our discussion of the opportunity sites. You'll recall from the previous meeting the overview map that identifies the sites by location, name, and presents the alternatives. This is the material that's essentially presented to you in your packet for this evening. And I'm going to turn it over to Amy, who's going to renew our discussions, and we're going to begin with Site F, the Tri-W property.
Good evening, everybody. So want to start out with the clarification that happened during the February 2nd public workshop. The city staff was able to clarify that while some of the information at the city says that there is visitor serving commercial land on this site, it's actually incorrect, and we've had several comments about that, including at the workshop. So the designation should be district commercial, which is the pink, instead of that dark red that you see. So that's for the existing and the alternative on this slide. So basically, what I think most of you know, but just to go over it, this site is just east of the highway and near the Morro Bay Boulevard exit, and it does have a measure that was put into place in the 1990s by the voters of Morro Bay that addresses this site, and it restricts the types of land uses that are allowed, and it's relatively narrowly identified. So that is the that commercial that we already discussed, as well as some open space, and then you'll see there's a corridor where there's that creek bed in the middle with the green. So if this site is considered for land use changes during the update, and we're interested in your input tonight, we realize that it would require another vote of the people of Morro Bay in order to change what's allowed there now. So what we have here for your consideration under Alternative 1 is that some residential development be allowed at this site, and that's what the orange is on the right-hand side there. That would be medium-density residential, which is 7 to 15 units per acre. And we are also thinking about the idea of if that did occur, or if any development did occur on this site in the future, what about clustering it closer to the proposed WRF site so that there's not as much piecemeal development happening in that area of the city? So we are open to your questions and comments.
So, Amy, could you clarify then exactly, the pink area, which is labeled district commercial, is actually visitor serving commercial?
No, it's the opposite. So actually, Measure H does not allow any visitor serving commercial on this site. So the map is incorrect, and it should all be district commercial.
Well,
You want to define that?
I'm sorry, there's actually a correction here. The areas that are in red on the left-hand map that says existing are supposed to be green.
Okay, that's open space.
Oh,
Which is open
okay.
space, sorry.
Okay.
Yes, not commercial.
Thank you. I didn't
Not
understand
visitor serving
that.
commercial, not any commercial. The previous, so there was two measures on the lot, on this property. One was, I think, Measure B. That was the first one, and that put visitor serving commercial there. For whatever reason, our map persisted with that. Not unclear why, but that's, at least from what I can tell, that's what happened. And then Measure H came later, passed, and took that visitor serving commercial off of there. And then changed those red areas to open space. We're going through a process where we're verifying exactly what happened, and I have a big box in my office right now that we're going to be going through on, I think, Tuesday next week to look at it. But that's what we've come. That's our conclusions so far.
So is the proposal to put visitor serving commercial there or not?
No, it's to take the area that's pink on the right hand side of the drainage in the middle.
And make it orange?
Yes,
Okay.
where residential could happen.
Okay.
That's it. That's it.
Okay. Is there an issue, and I'm going to apologize if this is a stupid non-engineer question, but is there an issue with the reclamation facility and water treatment facility out there and putting residential very close to it? Certainly there have been people up in arms about where this thing will be located.
So when they say next to it, the two properties, when you get to the end of this property, you have a whole nother 3/4 of the property that it sits on further south. So they wouldn't really be close to one another.
Okay, where on so the treatment facility is going to be on the left, the part that's now pink on the right side, right?
It's one property removed from this. It literally is South Bay Boulevard straight up is where the water reclamation facility is. This is right up from the roundabout.
About over there.
Okay,
right?
so, I see. Okay.
So yeah, so
Okay.
where the red dot's going on the wall.
All right.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
that's-
So
it
this
would
is
be-
climbing up the hill, basically, there.
Yeah.
Okay. That's not going to be downwind of anything, or
The prevailing winds blow the other direction, although we do
Usually it
get
goes-
although we do get
you do sometimes
offshore
get
winds
it coming
sometimes.
that way. I'm just
Yeah.
wondering, it's like you don't want to build housing right next to the airport, I mean.
Well, and the technology they're using for the wastewater treatment plant probably
That was-
is
well,
going to
that's
have
it.
things that are involved that limit smell issues.
Certainly people have been concerned about that in some of the discussions that have happened.
I think it might help a little bit if we just step back and say, what Measure H did, if I understand it, is it carved about 13 acres out of a 30-acre piece that could be developed for something.
Commercial.
Right? And so, does that parcel consist of 13 acres?
The one on the left.
They're not. It's not a parcel.
No, but does that diagram that's colored, do the colored pieces consist of 13 acres?
It's supposed to.
Okay. I'm just trying to get clear what we're doing here.
Yeah, it's the pink part, 13 acres.
So-
it's supposed
This
to
block
represent
over
that.
here is
So we have to imagine that most of that one on the left is pink except for the green corridor and the green at the top. No,
Yeah.
you said green, and
So these are all green.
that's all green except for the two pink pieces.
Yeah.
So the only change we're looking at here going forward would be making residential
This
on that
piece right
right-hand
here.
side.
That's it.
Correct.
So,
And then-
the question,
so-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So it would help to have that all in a bigger map with the WRF on it.
Which is over there.
A study Area 3 map that would show how the relationship of those things.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, Amy, why is this change proposed? I mean, what is the impetus for proposing this?
Well, one reason is that your zoning code, I know we're not supposed to be talking about zoning that much right now, but the zoning code does allow residential on some of this site. And the housing element did analyze it for some residential. So it's something to consider
Been considered in the past, at least loosely.
in this other part of the general plan update.
It seems like a good location for putting, I mean, somewhere if you want to have affordable housing, you have to have some level of density. And it seems like this is a good place where it wouldn't really impact a lot of existing neighborhoods because it's right, easy access to the freeway and that kind of thing. So I think it's a good change.
But that's probably not going to be medium density if it's going to be
But-
affordable housing.
But making it more, putting more houses there implies that we can provide water for there, right? And right now, when we have a lot of water and it's raining, we're thinking we can, but last year, wasn't there concern about, there was a concern about the water. So when we move ahead to this one water plan, we're allowing for the more
Well, I mean,
how many more houses are we allowing for, I guess, is what I want.
The one water plan is simply that. It's to develop a plan that looks at all of our water holistically. The intent, given, to this point in the process, is that the city would be looking potentially to get off when our state water contract is up, to get off of it, because their state water project right now is, I would imagine our state water bill is going to go up dramatically given the amount of work they're doing in the Bay Delta area to get water from Northern California to Southern California. This is an ability, not this, but putting the WRF in place and a water reclamation facility component to utilize some of the water that comes out of that. And so then looking at that, and then we have a desalination plant. So looking at using that and what the cost of that is. And so that's what the plan's going to look at.
Okay.
Diversifying.
Because right now, we only are allotted a certain amount of water from the state, right?
Correct. Yeah, correct. And that's only when the water is available. Otherwise, and over time when there's drought, which is what's been over the past several years, they reduce our allocation.
That's
and then
right.
so the city has a bunch of drought buffer to make up for that in water storage. So it's a complicated
But
process.
having the water saved up on paper is different than having the actual water.
Correct,
if
which
there's
is
no
why we want to
available.
diversify.
I understand all that. So when all this is in the diversification, there will be allocations or planning, hopefully, that it would be able to sustain more houses.
Yes, and right now, we have a permitting process that requires you to bring twice the amount of water to the table that you would otherwise use in savings. And so, in various ways, building houses actually saves water. Sounds weird, but that's what the program is set up to do. You come in with your new house, and you have to offset the water usage by once again, 2 times.
I hear there's a bunch of water up in Oroville that would be willing to give us extra water.
I think it's probably good to point out, too, just to the general public, that we do have an upper limit on how much housing we can have, and there's also kind of a state requirement that we grow at a certain level. So, I think it's a scary thought to think of more development, more housing, oh my gosh, and I think we're working for as much infill as we can on undeveloped lots, but I think looking towards having some of this affordable housing, workforce housing property, it's not an unreasonable thing to be looking at areas like this and helps us fulfill our responsibility.
We have a water allocation program that the city council adopts every year and says how many water hookups that we can issue per year for single-family development. So that's a process that we go through every single year. We just, I think, changed the timing of it from December, January to June, I think, or something. But
I think that this parcel here, I'm sorry, I keep saying parcel, I shouldn't use those technical words, but this colored polygram here is actually under Measure H, so it has a special status. And I think that changing that to a residential land use designation, a land use designation is like a promise that this is, if we did development here, this is what we'd want to do with this. So saying that in and of itself is maybe provocative. I know there are a lot of people in this city who don't want to see development there. So given the fact that we can make that change going forward, if we reached a point where our infill and other residential development could not hold the capacity we needed, we could revisit this. I would advise against changing it now.
Sure. I mean, I mean, that's what the discussion's for.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had people some of the input that's happened as part of the outreach that we've been doing is that, identify areas where we could have additional housing, hopefully affordable housing. That seems to be the drum that's beating out there. And so this was an opportunity, potentially that we saw to do that. Now, this opportunity requires a vote of the people to make it happen, because the land use out there was set by the measure. And so if we went through this process, we would say, yeah, we're interested in that, but then there's a whole other component to it, and there would be a vote of the people before that change would take place. So.
Yeah, I still think, you've got senior housing not far from there. There was some support today for senior housing, and there's just more dense housing in general. I think when you hear what people are saying about developing either infill, I know we should be doing infill, but some of the development that would impact existing neighborhoods, and this actually wouldn't. And I just think that we should have this as an option on the table.
A few additional.
I didn't quite understand about moving it closer to the plant, though. Can you?
That's where you need your map.
What would be the logic of moving it towards, to me, a less desirable place?
I think I might have sparked some confusion because I was concerned about the proximity of this parcel to the plant.
It's that close.
No, but I thought you said
it's not that close.
So it was a good clarification question from Susan that it wouldn't necessarily be right next to the plant, but if, like Glenn said, if we had a map where we could look at that whole area of the city, if you did open this site up for consideration again, one idea to consider is, could it be, so if you look here at the green area, on the bottom right corner is Site C, and that's the WRF proposed site.
Tri-W, that's the WRF.
Right. So then if those were a little bit closer together, it would be less leapfrog development. So that's just something for consideration. If the community was developing or considering any changes to Site F, to the Tri-W, that's, they could be closer together, not right next to each other. Like we talked about, topography would prevent that anyway.
I understand that, and I wouldn't be in favor of leapfrog development either, but that piece that as presented on this map, is directly out from the roundabout. It has connectivity there.
Yeah, it does.
And then the wastewater down at the South Bay Boulevard area has connectivity there. So I'm a little bit lost about why you think we need to move them to avoid leapfrog.
It's more of a point of discussion. It's not that we think one is the better solution. It's something that we've had input on, so we thought we'd bring it to you to see what you thought as well. It sounds like you're thinking it is better where it is.
And it may be better expressed as an intent to cluster the development potential of that property into a smaller footprint. That may be a better way of expressing the intent here, because I think you look at a piece of land like that and a map like this, and the immediate reaction is, well, it's going to be medium density spread across that whole area. And it could be that what the general plan does is say, no, the intent is to designate that area for medium density, but realize that development toward the south and east portions of the property, or areas that are not environmentally constrained.
And my other concern would be that the reason why the treatment plant is going where it's at is because of the backlash of the people that didn't want it in their backyard already. So why would we want to move residential closer to something that people didn't want in the first place? It doesn't make sense to me.
It's literally not moving it that close. When you get to the end of this property,
you're still far
There's
away.
the entirety of the property what's the subdivision, there's Seashell Estates that sits between it, and right now there's no houses on it, but that's this road that goes up there. It doesn't have any houses on it. That would be between it, and the property that sits on would be between it, so there's separation.
A map would help, yeah.
It sounds like it'd be a lot further away than the current plant is to any residential and school and...
I don't know the microphone, but...
So here's where it's at, right? And then here's here's the property line, and then Seashell Estates is over here. So as close as it can get would be over in this area. It's a giant hill. Separated by quite a bit from the side. And there's a big hill on this, and the plant's going to sit behind it.
I think we're fine.
if that helps.
So at this point, do you want, I mean, we don't do a motion. This is just a recommendation.
It's a discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, we generally like to,
Get some.
let's say, take the pulse of the GPAC.
pulse.
Right.
I have to bring up a couple of things about residential here, okay? Number one, Morro Bay already has an enormous excess of residential land use, okay? We currently have about half as many jobs as we have workers in this town, okay? So the real need in this community, as far as economics, is jobs, okay, is economic development. And yet, residential development is much easier to do. It's much easier to finance. You build it, you sell it, you're out. You know, it's a very attractive thing to happen. And I would say the chances are, if we do this, the chances are about 95%, the residential part will get built way, way, way before the commercial part of it. My assertion is that what we're talking about is not the right land use designation, because we haven't developed those yet. But, you know, in order to provide affordability, okay, in order to provide density, and in order to ensure that the economic part of this proposal gets built, okay, we need to not separate the economic and the residential. We need a land use designation that says you can build residential as part of a mixed-use project, but you've got to have the commercial component. That's the only way to ensure that the two of them will get developed at the same time. And I wouldn't be opposed to including some residential component in with this neighborhood commercial that we've got now, but not the primary component, and not the thing that is the only thing that's likely to get built.
A couple of comments I'd like to throw into the pot here. My inclination in general, when we see residential proposed on the other side of a geographical barrier, which we'll call Highway 1, that is a problem in many cities, that those areas become isolated. There might be affordable housing there, but they sometimes become problem housing areas. And I'd like to see residential within the city where the residential areas exist already. To me, that seems like a great place for an industrial complex, low-rise industrial buildings, something not residential. So those are my thoughts.
I would have to go with what Glenn said, and I think that we should table this, not look at changing this at all for now.
Well, I would
And
think,
leaving it in the same spot, not moving it down towards the south.
I would think, though, that one of the things you'd have to do in order to develop this is you would have to put in those accesses to other areas that, as a condition of development. You have the area, the harbor tract, for example, is built up the hill. Kind of, I sort of think of that as maybe similar to this, and it's built up the hill, and they had to put in access roads and connect, and it connects to city streets. And so I don't think what you're talking about is just having this thing that just sits out there by itself and no way to get anywhere. I think it would have to be able to tie in, and people would have to get places.
Directly off the exit of Morro Bay Boulevard.
Right, and so it would tie into Morro Bay Boulevard, and so I'm not sure that it would be even as isolated as say, the harbor tract, which is kind of by itself. You know, it seems like it'd almost be in with the heights, or the lower part of the heights over there, because you've got Las Tunas is right over there as well, you know, so pretty close by. So I don't know. I mean, I don't see how this would be really that isolated, and you would want to put in adequate access roads and make sure it doesn't impact the neighborhoods and the streets around it.
So you're saying in favor of leaving it?
I'd like us to see, as part of this process, some area. I know there was some resistance to doing this along the Main Street corridor, where people were saying they don't want the high density traffic there, and that makes sense because you've got a very narrow road there and not good access. But I think here you do have that possibility of access, and I'd like to see us. You know, one of the things when we started talking, you know, and early on was affordable housing. You know, you've got to have some density. You've got to have, you know, you want housing for people of all ages. And I think if you don't designate any areas for new housing and all you're going to do is infill for the next 30 years, 15, 20 years, I'm just not sure that's a good plan. And so I'd like to see, maybe this is the right place or it isn't, but I'd like to see us at least keep that in mind and look for good sites to show people that this could be done.
Well, I think we.
I'd like some residential with it. Yeah, definitely.
I think we have a divided.
I think we do.
Committee here. Let's just, and we have some people who haven't really expressed a preference. Let's just do a straw poll, kind of, in terms of alternative A, or in terms of existing or alternative one. What are your preferences? Kind of just go down the line. Start with Glenn.
Keep it the way it is.
I would go with alternative one.
I'd go with alternative one.
I'd keep it the way it is.
So you get, I'm going to vote for keep it the way it is because I can't go with the purely residential use. So I think you get kind of a, I don't think we're going to come to a consensus on this one, so you kind of have a straw poll.
Right, and I just want to highlight a couple of things that Amy said in the presentation of this, and kind of align it with where I think we're at this stage. We're setting what we think should be the land use policy for this area when we lay out the general plan. And for one reason or another, it sounds as though a portion of this site may already be residentially zoned, and it was considered a potential site for affordable housing in the housing element. So that's to say that's just the stage that's already set, and it's an inconsistency. Those items are inconsistent with what's presented in the general plan right now. One of the jobs that we have in front of us in updating the general plan is to clean up those inconsistencies. The important thing is we're hearing from you what the land use policy for this area should be. That could have some ramifications down the road, for example, finding other places to put the affordable housing that was attributed to this area in the housing element. So, I think those are just things that, that we need to consider as we go about the business of implementing these recommendations. But I just want to lay that out there as context and awareness for the committee.
Well, I think if that becomes an issue, then we come back and reweigh it. Right. If you come back and say, okay, since you don't want the residential here, it's got to go here, then we may have to revisit it.
Right. But what we're hearing is, there's mixed opinions on the committee, but the overwhelming proportion of the committee is looking at, we should leave this the way that it was set up by the initiatives.
And Jeff, let me just clarify. The thing that's driving me most is that the law, not the land use and not zoning, but the law we have says this is what we should have.
Right.
And to make a change here, our recommendation here, seems to me that it presumes or provokes that we have to revisit that in an election.
Agreed.
So, and I'm saying we don't need to do that now, and there's no reason to get people upset that we're going to be making a change that many of them really support, and supported many years ago.
Right.
So,
as a result, we have other cleanups to go do, and we'll be looking at the ways to do that. Right.
And the reality is that there might come a time in the future. Let's say we're getting close to the 12,200. Then that might be the time to revisit this and say, okay, we got no place else to go.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
And I think you've discussed this early on in our early meetings, that our completed general plan is only going to be as good as its ability to change. So, like Glenn said, we can always come back and visit this, but for right now, I think we should just leave it like it is.
The only thing I would add in support of the other perspective is that no one's saying that we have to have an election right now, or that we have to change this right now, or that we have to do anything to it right now. I think, at least I don't think so. Are we saying that if since Measure H is already out there, are we saying we would have to have an election now to do it this way?
No.
Okay.
It would be if, something came forward to do the project out there.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking is.
We would have to go down that road, at least at that point.
Yes.
Otherwise, the city would have to decide to do it on its own. And it's probably the thing that makes the change viable would be, what are we getting?
Yeah.
Because no one's going to vote for something they don't know. they'd rather just keep it the way that it is. My feeling is, you show them something that, oh, this is what it could look like if you did X, Y, or Z. It could be a mixed-use project like Chair Teff was talking about. It could be something else, who knows? And so that's when it would happen. If it didn't make it through the vote process, it wouldn't be residential.
Well, that's what I was thinking then, if that you would decide it at the time, but you'd at least provide some indication that this would be a good location potentially for something like that. So.
Just things for when we go to council.
Okay, our next site is what we're calling the Highway 41 Gateway area. So this is a little bit of the area north of Highway 41 and a big chunk on the south side. It's currently designated visitor serving commercial, general light industrial, and some medium and I believe there's some high density housing on there. It's residential, I should say. Not a lot. So basically, what we're proposing on this site is to change that middle portion there on the right that's orange to medium density residential, and that would kind of reconcile with what's on the ground now. And that's the mobile home park.
Do we have any idea how that got on the ground in a visitor-serving commercial area?
Yeah, is a mobile home park visitor serving commercial? That seems like residential.
It also has an RV component to it.
Okay.
That makes a little more sense, although I think they're mostly RVs that people live in or use as second homes in town.
Yeah, but I mean,
but it's been there for a very long time. I think it may actually predate our existing land use categories, because I see it, reference to it going back, way back in our records, so.
Okay, but that is the mobile home park under visitor serving commercial.
So what's the advantage of changing the land use designation?
Make it consistent.
Well, what's the advantage of doing that?
Right.
When you see inconsistencies out there, that's what this process is for. It's when we see inconsistencies on the ground, it's to have the discussion. Like, do we want to make the land use match what's there? Because we can. Because right now, you look at it and you're like, exactly what you said. Well, how do we have a mobile home park in visitor serving commercial? That makes no sense. Correct.
But it just seems to me that what's more important than what's there now is our vision of what should be there. In other words,
that's what we're asking. Tell us your vision.
Isn't that a good place for a mobile home park? I mean, there's already one there, and people seem to live in them, and it seems it's actually kind of cute if you've ever gone down there. And we should have that kind of affordable housing.
And it preserves a housing
and
option.
It's a good location,
Yeah,
right. So I think it's a good use of that space.
Could it be medium density instead of the? I'm sorry. Could it be high density instead of medium density?
It could, yeah.
So that maybe you could
encourage
as it aged, you could maybe look at affordable housing in that area.
Well,
no.
But with the RV.
Yeah, one detail here.
You know what I mean?
One detail here is that the areas to be rezoned to medium density residential include the areas which are currently RV parks. So those would almost certainly become mobile home parks if we change it. In other words, you're going to lose a bit of lower cost visitor serving commercial accommodations.
Well, in return for maybe some lower cost housing for people who might live here.
These are the trade-offs, right?
But yeah, and I think this is a good location for higher density because you've got such good transportation access right there, I think.
So why is the north side of Highway 41 not included in this area? Because it's mixed use right now. I mean, it seems odd to have visitor serving on the south side and mixed use on the north side.
I don't know why it's the way that it is. I mean, leading up to this, we had the item that went before the Planning Commission for the expansion of that mobile home park, you may recall. and started looking at the land uses that were over there then, as what was going on here, and then you started looking at what's on the ground and what the zoning was there, and it's a little bit of a mystery to me. I mean, obviously I haven't been here that long, so I don't really know, but looking back at it, it is a little bit odd.
No, but I'm saying the opportunity area that we're looking at doesn't include the northeast corner of Highway 1 and Highway 41, or North Main Street and Highway 41.
Oh, the corner where we have the pending Sonic application, and
which is, you know, it is a big empty lot, and then another site that's going to be a Sonic drive-in, or maybe someday Sonic drive-in.
Yeah, that's where the North Main area starts.
Right.
It just right. I mean, but it seems like that's natural because it's at the gateway of the city. It seems like that's a natural visitor-serving commercial.
North Main runs right.
That that corner there.
Runs right.
What is the designation of that area right now?
Mixed use.
Right.
Mixed use.
Yeah, I would agree with those comments. I mean, I think we all agree that's an important entrance to the city in 41 there. And what that looks like when you come to the city, I think is important, and it should be consistent and look like it's planned. I'm not sure what the benefit is to kind of conceding to, well, it's there now, so we're going to change the zoning. My inclination would be to have some visitor serving land use along that strip in front of that park, at least, at the very least.
Along the front, in the area where the RVs are?
Yeah, and then the properties that are north of 41, as Dr. Teft has mentioned, I think need to be looked at as well.
And just a point of clarification, those are part of Site E.
Site E, okay.
The North Main corridor.
Yeah, because it seems like you've got a lot of people living in that area, and there's been condos built in that area, and so there's sort of higher density. It would be nice to have some services there that not only visitors could use, but the people who live there can use within walking distance of a fairly big concentration of people there.
Did I hear a comment about potentially splitting this and maybe treating the frontage separately from
that
back?
was just a thought I had.
Okay.
So just for clarification again, what is the difference between, on the first existing one, that area is visitor serving, right? Visitor serving commercial.
Correct.
And on the alternative, you wanted to make it high-density residential.
Medium density
Medium
residential,
density. But you're also talking about how it would be a good place for a mobile home park. So if a mobile home park stays there, what's the...
The mobile home park would be medium density residential.
So it falls into both categories?
Well, it's more appropriate and consistent in the medium density residential.
It might end up with a zoning classification on it that says mobile home park.
Right.
When we implement it. So this is the land use categories. When we go to zoning, it might say mobile home park, so it just reflects what's there.
Or it may not, in the interest of saying it could be the mobile home park, or it could be some other form of medium density housing in the long-term future.
Yeah.
Right.
But there is quite a bit of state law that protects existing mobile home parks. So there would be a very deliberate process if that conversion was proposed.
Correct.
So it doesn't happen with just a development application.
So if you kept the land use as visitor serving, it would be easier to keep a mobile home park there?
No.
It would be the other way,
Other way.
the other way.
It's more appropriate that it have a residential designation than a commercial designation.
It says what it is.
If you want to match the on-the-ground land use.
Just random question about this discussion got me thinking. Do you know, Scott, off the top of your head, the number of units in the city, dwellings that are mobile homes?
8%.
8% of how many units do we have? 5,400, so 8 times 400 something mobile homes then?
That sounds about right, yeah.
So we're not overloaded with mobile homes, and they're a great affordable housing alternative.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, this literally came to light. You heard me discussing with Chair Teft the application that we brought forward to expand that facility there. Well, we couldn't because it was non-conforming. But the city, to account for that, put zoning on it that has a bunch of overlays on it. One of them is interim use, and so we were able to accommodate that through an interim use thing. That's weird. And you would rather have your zoning say what you can do as opposed to having all these exception things that are on top of it. It's just odd that way. And so if you can make it reflect what's on the ground and then tell the story through the zoning about what else could go there, that's okay. It should be in the basic zoning, though, as opposed to a bunch of exceptions that you're writing into it.
Yeah, I think it's important to do what we can to preserve those kind of housing options in the city. And if this will help do that, I think that's a good thing.
Have we looked at all, I mean, if we're, so, it kind of looks like we're coming down to the concept of sort of, with the exception of this one parcel that's already built, and probably when we talk about north of Maine, I think that's a mobile home park across the street from it too, a small one. But I don't know if it's mobile home or RV, to tell you the truth. I don't know if it's long-term. Okay.
I don't recall either.
You know, but it sounds like what we're sort of coming down to is the concept of having visitor serving commercial directly fronting the highway with higher density residential kind of behind it. And I wondered if we've looked at some of these interior lots that are light industrial and visitor serving along Errol Street here, because I don't know that those are great opportunities for visitor serving commercial unless
May not be.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good question. The problem that we run into is removing visitor serving commercial land use in the city when we get to coastal.
Yeah.
They don't like us to remove stuff like that.
They would like probably for us to have a no net loss.
Right. But if
there's going to be that discussion, I think.
Yeah.
But if we look at that strip on the north side of the intersection, we might be able to, it might be a no net loss.
Put it somewhere else.
You know, in other words, you've got something that doesn't require visitor serving commercial right along the highway on vacant lots, you know, and at the same time you've got areas that are not great for visitor serving commercial along Errol Street that probably could be higher density residential.
Good point.
Yeah,
you know,
true.
Can't we just swap some of those uses, you know?
The answer is, can we do that? Yeah, yes. I mean, we certainly could give some consideration to that. I'd like to hear what some of the other.
Yeah, me too.
Other of you think as well. So if you could weigh in on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent idea to look at that.
Okay, Errol Street is the one on site of Taco Bell. And if you go down the end of it, there's mostly industrial in there.
There's Mission Linen there.
Mission Linen
The metal
and stuff
shop,
like
I
that.
think,
So it's
is in
like,
there.
it's as convoluted as where the mobile home park is, as far as how did they get there.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different stuff over there.
So,
Yeah, you've got the freeway access there, and you've got Highway 41. It does seem like a good area for visitors serving commercial along that corridor if that could be done. But not necessarily. But the interior lots, I mean, you do have to have, you need a place for people to have a metal shop or something like that. Maybe that is a good location in the back. That's what you're thinking, right, Rob?
when Bob mentioned, looking in a more globally, bigger picture, it's like I'm envisioning, like we've discussed, Dr. Teff, about the entrance to from Morbe Boulevard and fleshing out where the park is and purchasing more land and make that a bigger entrance to the city, a bigger statement, an entry statement, so to speak. So coming in from this, I'm visually coming in from Atascadero from the valley, do we want to at least zone to prepare and develop that into a more pleasing, aesthetic-looking entrance to the city than what's there now? I mean,
When I was first looking at this, the part I think that Dr. Teft raised is, the part that puzzled me was why the area to the west of, on the north side of 41, go to the westernmost boundary of the brown stuff, the high density, and then going west from there, why aren't those parcels in part of this opportunity area? That was the main thing that puzzled me, because that whole area, I think that the general thing we're talking about here, yeah, I know it's in the other corridor, but it's going to function as part of the gateway. So, yeah, and I think that Rich is right on that.
And when we talked about it before, there was alternative one land use on site E-map, and I think
that's part of the North
it's hard to
Pacific
tell your
area,
codes, but it looks like visitor serving commercial is what was proposed for that. And I think, as
On
I
site
recall, Yeah, on
It's
site.
actually,
Right.
we have neighborhood commercial proposed, but
Okay.
But it seems entirely appropriate to maybe...
they're adjacent, so we're open to your thoughts on this area.
It seems entirely appropriate to, go ahead with neighborhood serving commercial up here, but then as you approach the intersection, flip it to visitor serving.
Visitor serving. I would.
That seems consistent with the discussion that I think I'm hearing.
Makes a lot more sense.
And for planning purposes, I mean, really, that lower part should be moved out of Site E into Site G. Site G should be planned as a whole rather than...
Agreed.
You know.
Yeah, so that we should basically sort of draw this off and bring that corner into the picture, right?
Well, either that or have all of this be Site E.
And do we want to discuss maybe too
It doesn't need to be.
the easterly part of your map there on the south side, that's
All the
extension
industrial.
of the light residential. We have the
specific
light industrial, I'm sorry. We have the lumber yard and then a couple things, but then that strip up above going out to the end there, is there anything in there now? Or is it vacant land? And I seem to remember not much there.
Masonic Hall?
It's,
In other words, the peninsula past Miners and
property out
Oasis,
here.
that area over in there.
miners, there's vacant land and some houses.
Again, there's, in my vision, to have this entry statement to the city, that will we be better off with visitors serving
Visitor serving
accommodations
going up
there?
there.
And leave miners and them, because they're grandfathered, they're there, but I mean, kind
Coastal
of
boundary.
give an opportunity to bring people in.
That's all. What do people think about visitor serving on that end? And would that encompass the other existing industrial, or would it basically skip over and really mark the gateway?
I tell you, we need a hardware store. I mean, I really think
Right.
we should respect that.
Agreed.
Is that where the Grange Hall is now, on that end, or is that farther out?
I think the Grange is further out.
That's further
too.
out.
Further out.
That's out.
I don't
It's
know.
relatively undeveloped right now.
It doesn't make sense to me to have that be visitor serving.
Right.
To me, that sounds sort of leapfroggy. I mean, what we have there is the general light industrial, so we've got miners, we have, a cabinet shop place there, and then, of course, there is the antique mall place, so you have some
have
visitor
that.
stuff, but seems like it makes sense even for ag industrial, something to be out there if, there was a need for
Stays.
cold storage or I don't know what, but
How about boat storage for something?
yeah.
If we were going to change it, if we were just going to, if we were starting fresh,
Makes sense.
I would say
Otherwise, no.
make it green space. I mean, that's really out of, visually, you're out of town when you
Yeah.
pass Miners,
Well, yeah, and it's it's all stream corridor out there. As soon as you get past the end, it's all, vegetated and whatnot.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Okay.
and the creek runs through there.
Okay, I think we've got some good feedback on this one. Any additional comments on G?
I think as long as I think we're sort of in agreement, though, to redesignate that area medium density
Redesignate that medium
residential
density,
makes
and
sense
then
for
maybe
consistency.
there's an option with or without commercial visitor
Yeah.
on the frontage.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think there was a general consensus to maybe look at some of those interior uses to see if this
Consider these
designation
interior
is
uses.
appropriate, or if there is an opportunity for more higher density housing, sort of behind the visitor serving.
Kind of maybe transitioning this so it's more of there's commercial visitor on the frontage and more housing behind.
It's not a bad combination. I mean, if you have restaurants and stuff, people from the housing will walk down and eat at the restaurant,
Okay.
Absolutely.
That area is really underserved with commercial establishments, I think, other than, Taco Bell and those kind of places.
Hey, Lee Shack.
That's right.
All right, Site H, which is the measure D/CF area.
So as you can see here, we are not proposing any alternatives to this site, so this is the existing land use. There is a little bit of cleanup, I believe, to be done. There's some open space designation in there as well as some industrial. So it's likely that may all changed to be commercial recreational fishing, which is what the light purple color is. And that's, to back up a little bit, that is what was put in place by Measure F.
Site H.
Measure D.
Let me start over. Measure D. There are too many of those letters on this map. And so that is the measure that established this area as prioritized for commercial fishing and related uses. The thing that we do want to get your input on tonight, and we've already heard from some of you as stakeholders and your input in the past. We've also heard input from the stakeholders we met with last fall, as well as from the Planning Commission and the Council on this. So we're interested in your thoughts on whether there is a need to clarify Measure D. And if that is what is expressed through this process, then the city would need to determine how that would be possible. We have heard pretty strong feedback so far from most people that they're not interested in this going back before the voters. We are interested in your input on that as well, but that is a pretty strong trend in the input we've heard so far. So if it wasn't going to go to the ballot, we understand that there could possibly be ways that either policy or zoning could help make it more clear what this measure allows and doesn't allow for the properties in this area.
Hi, I have just a couple of things. Can you talk about what those two dark purple things are?
Yeah, so that's what I was referring to when I said there was some inconsistency. So if you look at the zoning map, I believe this entire area is zoned CF. And for some reason, and if city staff wants to jump in if there's something I don't know about, there are a few parcels on the land use map that have the purple, which is industrial,
Is that
coastal
because of what's
industrial.
on there now? Is there something there that is more of an industrial thing? I'm not kind of getting just from
Not that I know of. I mean, I think generally these uses are all considered commercial fishing, recreational fishing uses. And then the green is open space recreation, which also
Okay. And then I guess
is inconsistent.
I think that they're the two purple areas.
Yeah.
I think one of them has an existing fuel dock, and the other one has an old fuel
Is
dock.
that what that
and
is?
they both
Okay.
have fish unloading facilities.
Okay,
I think
okay.
that's what's going on there now.
I find it hard to look at this area in isolation without considering, I know we're going to talk about the power plant area, but if you put something in the power plant area that's higher density housing or a convention center or something like that, it kind of makes sense to try and tie it into whatever could go here. You can't damage anything, get in the way of any of the fishing uses that's here because of Measure D. Is that the right one? Okay, but could you have some dual use facilities? Could you do? It's sort of weird to have one side of the road totally disconnected from the other side of the road. So I'm not sure what that means in terms of this process, but it's just a little odd to. And if you're going to put a lot of stuff over on the other side of it, maybe there should be some connection or some relationship to the other side of the road.
I would like a little bit of clarification. Does anyone know what exactly Measure D itself covers in this map?
The entire area that's
All the way
shown
to
on
the
this
rock?
map. That's correct, yeah.
If there's any piece of this that strikes me as needing rezoning, it would be between where that little green piece is now and out to the rock. That is used as open space recreation, either OA1 or OA2, I don't know which, but it would make sense to me to call it that because that's how we're going to use it in the future, and to plan to use it that way. Now, if that violates Measure D, I realize it's a problem, but if it can be done, it would make sense to me to do that.
Yeah, there's no fishing going on, at the bluff on the other side of the walking path. I mean, there may be fishing going on in the water, but not on the land there, as far as
I don't think it would be a problem with Measure D, because Measure D deals with development, and what we're talking about here is no development. I don't think it would run afoul of Measure D.
Wasn't part of the idea to keep things like food trucks and all from going out there because that would not be considered the commercial recreational fishing use? I mean, I sort of feel like there was something in Measure D and the idea that you didn't want somebody going out with a coffee cart or whatever to the rock.
Well, Measure D would still apply regardless of the land use category.
Right, yeah.
You know, I'd like to speak a little bit more directly to the question here, which is, does Measure D need to be amplified? And I want to agree with everybody else that in town, I think, that Measure D should not go back on the ballot. However, you know, my observation is that Measure D is really being applied right now with a good deal of judgment, and you know, it's been well utilized. But the problem is, it's all informal. You know, there's nothing in writing as to say this is the way we're applying it. So a week from now, it may be applied completely differently. You know, or if there's changes in personnel, you know, in the next few years, there may be a totally different slant. So I think it's not immediately apparent how some of the ways in which it's currently being applied are derived from the language of the measure. So I think getting those things down on paper would be a real, you know, and sort of saying this is the way it's working would be a real good idea in the long run.
I agree. I'd like to also hear tonight or further on, what negative comments have you got from the public as far as why are they asking for a better design? What are the hiccups that you've heard about so far? Because for me myself to put any input in this, I need more of a tutorial of what Measure D is and why what's working, what's not working, and you know, before we can discuss it clearly. Just showing me a map doesn't really give me much to go by.
So I think we can follow up with you further also, but one example I'll give is that the way that the language in Measure D reads, it doesn't get into a list of uses that are allowed and not allowed, for example, like a zoning other zoning categories might in the zoning code, and so it's somewhat of a subjective decision when a project or an addition to an existing business comes forward, say like a restaurant use or something that it's an interpretation whether it's directly related to commercial or recreational fishing. And I don't know if anyone else wants to add examples that have actually happened, but that's...
So I'll give you one, and I don't want to belabor this point because we could sit here for hours and talk about it. So you've all heard about the city talking about putting a boat haul facility out here, right?
Yes.
In this area, right?
Correct.
That's consistent with Measure D, right?
No.
It's not, because it doesn't primarily serve commercial fishing industry, the commercial fishing industry. It primarily would serve recreational boaters, because that's the majority of the boats that we have out there.
Well, except for the fact that Measure D doesn't actually define what primarily means. So
point being is if it was a strict interpretation, one could look at it that way, and that would be a problem. So
there's things like that. Somebody needs to write down, what does it mean, primarily serve? You know, how does that, you know, that's the kind of specifics that need to be laid out. And the other problem with it is, I can tell you, every leaseholder in the Measure D area thinks that the other leaseholders are getting a better deal from the city than they are. Every single one of them.
So the opportunity that lies before us, should we choose to accept it, is, okay, this is the map component, right? Which is basically just saying, you know, we need to do some cleanups and we need to essentially identify all of this as commercial/recreational fishing, right? The zoning side, there's a CF zone that goes with this. There is the opportunity to really rework that CF zone to make the permitted use tables be very clear. And then you've got your general plan and your zoning doing the work of Measure F. And then you're not doing Measure D. Measure D.
That's right. we knew what you meant.
You've got your general plan and your zoning doing the work of Measure D. as opposed to the ballot box. So I mean, this is the dialogue. This is the opportunity. That's recognizing there's a lot of folks in the community who are very attached to the measure, doing the work.
No, and I think it's very important in undertaking that process to show the connection, to show that what we're doing is deriving these specifics from Measure D.
Exactly.
Not overturning
Exactly.
Measure D.
It's implementing Measure D. And then saying it's not whether the proposed use is consistent with Measure D or not, it's whether the proposed use is consistent with the zoning or not. And you're saying the intent and the backing of Measure D is fundamental and important, and therefore we're baking it into our regulatory documents.
So for our purposes tonight, we can cut short the discussion.
Right.
Because Measure D is going to continue to demand these land use categories generally. So come back in 3 months.
Exactly.
Okay.
Before we cut it short, I have a couple of questions, if we could. I'm not completely clear what the dark purple uses would actually be. It says coastal development industrial. What kinds of uses are we talking about? What does that mean?
I think that's intended to be coastal dependent industrial.
Excuse me, coastal development
and
industrial.
you're reading the map correctly. It's yet another mapping
So what
issue.
kinds of use would that be in those two areas, and why are they?
Coastal dependent industrial is...
Coastal development industrial.
Right.
It's coastal dependent is the actual category, and it would be like what if we put a fish processing plant there.
Right.
Yeah. Coastal dependent. That's an
Industrial that must be by the water to succeed.
Yeah.
As opposed to the other industrial farther up 41.
Boat haul facility.
Okay.
And how about like a fuel dock, another fuel dock?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So it's not that those uses wouldn't be allowed in the CF or the commercial recreational fishing designation. It's that some of the things allowed in the CF might not be allowed in the industrial designation.
Okay.
And that's opposite of what Measure D's intent is, which applies to those purple areas. So it's an inconsistency in the existing mapping.
So you might not be able to put a fish market in the dark purple zone.
So is that big dark purple, this is the existing plan, the existing land use? Is that big one, is that where the intake plant is for right now for the for the power plant? So if it's not there, well, anyway.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Probably so.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
It may be, yeah.
It looks like it's about the right place.
That's the building, but the intake's over here. So
I think that's the outflow.
Okay, let's go to the next one.
How many do we got? We have 2 more to go. I don't think we're going to get there. So time check, we have 20 minutes to go, 2 sites remaining. What is the will of the committee, recognizing that we wanted to provide some time for the ending agenda items? Shall we power through one more?
yes, yeah.
All right.
Sure.
Site I. Go ahead.
So
Site I centers on City Park, which is the green in the middle, and similar to Site H, we are not proposing any changes to the land use designations in this area, but this area has been called out as an area where some folks that we've heard from think that there could be some changes over the life of the general plan and local coastal plan. Similar to the area where Highway 41 enters the city, this is a gateway area, so there could be things done as part of the zoning code or the policy in the general plan that would encourage this to be a more welcoming gateway area. We have also heard that future development should focus on non-residential development in this area, and as most of you probably know, there is a mix currently of existing. Something else that we've heard is possibly considering a civic center master plan at some point in the future. So a lot of the civic buildings are in this area. And that could include either additional development, like where there are parking lots or vacant spaces now, or just redeveloping the civic properties and uses as they need it over time, or to be more of a cohesive civic center, and including, just things like the buildings that are temporary or kind of old. So that's generally what we've heard in this area, and this area, I should also mention, is part of the downtown plan as well.
Question. If we're trying to make land use designations consistent with what's on the ground, there's a lot of public facilities right in this area. Why are we not using the PF land use designation for the library and city hall and the fire station and
that was some good questions.
the lot that the city owns next to the city hall? And I mean,
that's a good point.
Okay, and I guess just a clarification. I'm not sure I'm getting the color coding. The light color, there's blue, and then the stuff that's next to the blue, is that district commercial? Is that what that's supposed to be? I'm not sure I've got the color
pink?
coding right.
The pink is.
Is this
Yes.
right? This part along is all district commercial
Yes.
here? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to see this here because I know we talked about the park and the area around the park. The area that's on the sort of the, I guess for lack of a better term, I'll call the far side of the park there on, I don't know if it's Harbor, what that is, but is just right now kind of there's housing there, there's a derelict building that's been under construction for, 5 years, I have no idea. I don't know if anyone's living there. There's a bunch of stuff, a building got torn down, there's a bunch of dirt out there. Is mixed, I'm just wondering, mixed use would be nice, or is there some way to encourage something to be done with that area? It is really kind of unsightly, and mixed in with some buildings that people have done a little bit of sprucing up and things. It's kind of a wasteland over there a little bit, and I don't want to disparage places where people live, but a lot of it's just a bunch of dirt. Places where people used to live is driveways with nothing there. Is mixed use, is housing a good place for? Is that a good place for housing? I don't know, but that's. When you say mixed use, you expect people to come in with mixed, say, commercial and housing together?
No, not necessarily.
Or what is mixed use?
It can be either or.
It can be either
Right,
or,
and
okay.
The way it's currently defined in Morro Bay is that you could do 100% residential or you could do 100% commercial. That is something we've heard a lot of input on for the zoning part of the process, is to look at the mixed-use zones and possibly not allow 100% of anything.
Right. Designate mixed use at the general plan level, but in the zoning, have multiple mixed use designations, some of which may require ground floor retail, or may require a housing component, or may be looser in character. In some areas, maybe having that flexibility is more desirable. Whereas in others, you clearly want either the residential or the commercial or both. Right, so you have that flexibility at the zoning level to do those requirements.
And I guess I'd like to maybe have a conversation here, and I don't know if this is the right time to do it. I know we're short on time tonight, but we have a park there, which is a really nice park, and it would be nice to have something on that side that would be compatible with the park. I don't know, daycare centers or some sort of thing that would really be nice, where you could really use the park. It's a beautiful park, and but it just doesn't. Again, the two sides of the street don't necessarily match each other, I guess, if that makes sense.
In the next section on the vision and ideas and designs, this is talked about in more detail, right? And so all you're asking for us here is if we want to change the zoning on this, because on the visions and the ideas you gave, or the land use, they were based on this current land use, right? Then I think.
Yeah, so we're not actually asking for any, well, if you do think the land use should be changed, we'd like to hear that, but we're not proposing that.
Yeah. Then I think we should just keep it like this, land use as it is, and then make our other decisions when we get into talking about the design and the vision.
Right, with these types of, I put on the screen essentially the 4 bullets that we've used to summarize some of the discussion that goes with it, which is more of the policy component that would apply to this area.
I'd like to throw out an idea, guys, for the commission to consider. Again, this is our vision of what the town is going to look like, and not necessarily what is now. But I would like to see that little strip of district commercial on the west side of the park changed to open space recreation. so that that whole block now becomes park and serves as the catalyst for the redevelopment of the area all around it.
I think that would be nice. There is a low-cost housing, I think, there
There's
right
a
now.
there's a motel.
Yeah, but it's a residential motel, isn't it? I don't think it's,
I don't
I'm not sure
know.
what's there.
And I don't know how low cost it is, but there's an Oddfellows Hall and there's a liquor
Yes.
store. And, the vision, the long-term
Nice idea,
vision
though.
would be, it's not, the Oddfellow Hotel, the Oddfellows Lodge could potentially be a civic building, but the other things, I really think that property is not developed to its potential anymore, and I think it would be better served if that, I think the gateway to the city would be better served if that all became
So is this
park.
It's not.
I like that idea.
I do too.
I like
It's not
it.
a fun little place.
I would like to jump in on the, well, where'd your bullets go?
Green or even potentially, sorry.
Future development should focus more on non-residential development. I think we should look at the area that Susan was talking about. Let's say from east of the fire station on that west side, and kind of maybe try to stipulate residential above and commercial down below with daycare and stuff like that, contiguous to the park, so that we would again get to working on our affordable housing needs with that units above there. And to me, the geography over there lends to that to fit in and not kind of disappear, really, because there's hills behind it. So.
Yeah, you got to think a mobile home park behind it, and you got already some pretty intensive housing there. So I think that's a good location. I think the key, I really like Dr. Teff's idea. I think the key to having good, desirable uses of the park is having good things around it, and I think that's a good place to start.
Again, I would agree with what Jeff said, that we need to rework the idea of mixed use and have different categories of mixed use, and this could be a place, I mean, it has great access. You're right next to Albertsons, you're right next to Rite Aid, there's certainly all the public transportation right across the street. So, but it's one of those situations where it would work really well to have ground floor commercial, and and that can be a mixed use that we designate. That can be a zone that we come up with.
I think any residential upstairs would have really killer views, too.
Okay. 10 minutes to go, one site left.
And I would look, just to throw this, the quote mixed use that's along the western edge of this. That's certainly an area that could be a higher density residential as well. And again, it could be a residential commercial, but at a higher density maybe. Because again, right in the heart of town, very well located.
Yeah, I think some of these, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's that corner right there where the library is on one end. So, I mean, this is essentially the civic center.
Yeah,
at this
exactly.
intersection.
Right now, yes, right in that location.
Right, I would wonder too, I mean, if thinking about this as open space, is that also maybe a logical extension of the civic center? Where part of that properry
also
could
possibly,
be,
yes.
the future city hall, maybe on the backside of the park. Something, kind of big idea.
Or someplace where we move the police station or something.
Right. So, I mean, it could be that that's also a natural extension of a civic center. Okay. Last site, Site J. This is the Quintana Road corridor.
Okay, so there's a lot going on in this site as well. This includes the two existing shopping centers with the grocery stores. It includes the closed elementary school. So on the left-hand side, that's the high-density residential, or the brown area is the closed elementary school. It also has a little bit of medium-density residential, some district commercial, and some service commercial. and then the light blue with the dots is mixed use. So in terms of land use changes that are proposed in alternative 1, we are proposing to change the mixed use designated area, which is currently the Cookie Crock Shopping Center, to service commercial, so to the red. The reasons that we've heard for doing that are because that's what it is currently, and that perhaps residential isn't what's envisioned overall for this area. The other bigger picture idea that we want your thoughts on is the idea of, especially along Quintana, having this area transition into an area that is more neighborhood serving, or has more commercial uses that encourage walk-in traffic rather than what's there now, which has a lot of parking in front of the businesses and has a lot of commercial businesses that don't do a lot of walk-in services. So that's the overall concept, and we are definitely interested in your thoughts and questions.
Where are you talking about, Amy? You spoke about an area. I'm not clear where that is.
The last part of what I was saying, the encouraging walk-in, that's along Quintana.
Whereabouts?
So the whole thing.
Oh, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right.
The area in orange, this medium-density residential, isn't that the Catholic Church?
Yes.
So why would we want to keep it medium-density residential? Question.
From my perspective, it would be, if it isn't a church at some point, then it does have some housing potential.
Why is one shopping center service commercial and the other one district commercial? I think they're really similar. What's the difference between service commercial and district commercial?
I believe one of them allows more industrial uses.
Yeah, I think so.
So maybe district commercial would be more appropriate for those two areas.
So would the service commercial be more industrial? So that would be like,
Go the other way.
I don't know what, having not only an auto parts store, but
There's
an
a window store down there and
tire shops.
Yeah.
Mechanics and...
I'd like to talk about that brown area a little bit. That's got 3 different, I'm going to say parcels, and I hope you understand what I mean there. The one on the left is that old closed school. That closed school was built in 1935 and 36 by WPA money, and it's an historic building. So I don't think we had a plan to turn it into any kind of high-density or residential property. I don't know if you've walked that campus, but it's extensive. You walk around there's a lot of structures in place already that could be used or repurposed or rebuilt, and there's a lot of open space, there's playgrounds, there's a lot of potential in there for something. And it could be residential, or part of it could be. But that building itself, I think we should aim to keep. On the other side, across from St. Tim's, that's our meeting room at the community center. You know, we're probably not going to want to change that in the near future either, not in the lifetime of this plan. So I think that those 2 pieces might be usefully classified as something we could call community service land use. And that could apply to churches, to schools, to civic buildings, something where the point is we as a community use these places to come together, to be educated, to be entertained, to meet, to govern. It's a community-serving function. And I think those are important for us to keep. I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that that is valuable and keep it that way. That green space in the middle, that square, that is maybe a good place for high-density development because it's easy to get to services from there. So
Which place are you talking about?
The middle piece of the brown, that square, that's a green field right now. That's where PwC takes out their hawks to fly them before they can release them, to teach them. Yeah. Well, it's not even a playground. It's really just an open grassy field where you can play soccer there.
Then shouldn't that be kept community serving because it's because
Yeah, I
you
guess
play
I'm not
soccer
sure.
there, you can have.
We don't own, I mean, isn't that school district property anyhow?
Correct.
I think it is, all, it's all unified.
Yes, it's owned by the school district, and they lease out space within the existing buildings for commercial uses.
Okay, but I'm not sure why do you
school
keep a
use.
zoning there of residential then? I mean, I'm not really sure I understand the logic of it.
It's an opportunity site to put affordable housing on it. At least the portion potentially where the field is.
Well, where
I
the
don't
field
think
is,
the
there's
idea
so few playing fields in this town for youth and for
Yeah.
other people to use that I would really actually have a problem with putting, I mean, I do support high-density housing or medium, high-density housing for affordability, but that particular open space really is used by youth and other, for a purpose that cannot easily be transferred anywhere else. So I actually think we should try and keep it that
And
way.
the community
For that
s-
part. Now, the school buildings, I think, are another situation. Maybe you could put something else there. But the open field, I think, is a really important thing for this community.
Yeah, the community center should be public facility, again, right? And maybe, and not all of the school buildings are historic. Some of them are 1950s, they could, I could lose them, but the main building, I agree, is a
it's
historic
unique.
building.
Yeah, I think where the Civic Center is, to say that should be residential, I just find that weird.
Yeah, me too.
Or the community center.
Yeah, the other thing that Amy mentioned was the idea of trying to make more pedestrian-friendly uses along Fontana Road. We need, the town has to have places for, tire stores and box, places that you drop off packages and, vehicle-oriented uses. I mean, it's nice to talk about pedestrian, and the reality is, that's a very steep hill there. So any kind of pedestrian-friendly uses are only going to be for 18 years old and under.
I won't walk down there.
So I think the way it's developed with the sort of this is the part of town where we have the vehicle-oriented uses. It's working. I think it's functional.
You are right by the freeway, and you've got, a road that doesn't have a lot of other ingress and egress there, so it does make sense to leave that there.
Yeah, I mean, you can't pedestrian home from Limos with a 50-pound bag of dog food. That doesn't work.
So it sounds like while we may sort of support the ideas of the service commercial and district commercial uses, that brown area and even the orange area there might be better as either mixed use or public facility or some other terminology. I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing, is keeping the school and the playground open space, the church.
Jeff, are we going to get, because going all the way back to the baseline assessment, there's a historic section. Are we going to get to dealing with the idea of historic structures as part of this process as we go further down the line?
Yep.
So that might be where we'll revisit this site and some of the others.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you, Susan. I mean, I think that's essentially what we've heard, is essentially this needs to be redrawn to reflect the input that we've gotten from the GPAC tonight. Right. Okay, that concludes our presentation then for the evening. We'll pick up with the downtown waterfront plan on the 8th. I'll return to the chair.
Get a fresh start.
Sorry,
with high energy. Yeah. Okay, committee member closing comments? Any closing comments from anyone?
I have a letter from a gal who lives right in this neighborhood here, and it went to Public Works Advisory Board, it went to you, Scott, Council, and Rob Livick, and I think it's probably okay if I send it on to this committee. The interesting part to me was she talks about having residential dwellings in an area that has some of this mixed use zoning that we're talking about. So right across from this public building, having that stairway access, which is something that needs to be looked at by the city anyhow, just because it's kind of a hazard. But the kinds of things that go on when you throw those zoning areas together and maybe don't plan for better lighting, proper signage for things, having police going around and looking at an area, especially where you have a dead end, but it's also public access going up and down. So I just thought it was interesting as we look at and get all excited about the ideas of mixed-use zoning, that it brings with it some problems too, that we need to think about in the planning process. So if it seems okay and no Brown Act violation, and as long as it's not reply all and all of that, I would like to forward this on to this committee.
You can give it to me, and
Okay.
I can do that. Yeah.
You should have it already.
Oh, it's the one
It's
from
from
the-
Joyce?
yeah,
Or-
it's-
yeah.
Yeah, it is, okay.
Yeah.
I will do that.
I have a couple of quick comments. One is, I think this is a very good meeting in the sense that the public showed up, and I think with some very legitimate concerns that I've had for a long time, and that they clearly have. I think in general, we need to try and do a better job of keeping the information that we present 100% accurate. And if we find errors, we correct those errors immediately. I think that's really important to the credibility of the process. The other thought I had is the process is a little complicated, even for me, even though I'm on this commission. And I had a thought a week or so ago of the possibility of someone from your team taking about 5 minutes before the meeting starts and informally address the people who are here and explain the process in very simple terms. This is about land use. Zoning is this. This is where we are in the process. We've looked at this, this, and this. So the timeline gets explained a little bit, because the same questions seem to keep coming up from the public, and I think they're legitimate questions. I've spent a lot of time trying to learn this process. I still have questions. So I think that might help. The input from the community is super important. I want this final product to be completely legitimate, and I'd like things to be, anyone who walks in the door who's never been to a meeting before, I'd like to take a few minutes to update them in terms of what this meeting is about and where we are in the process. So I just throw that out there as something I'd like to see or be considered.
That's a good idea.
Thanks.
Yeah, and that could actually be part of the project update section that we do. If that, remember you guys had the flow charts that said this is what's going to happen. If we maybe just show where we are on the flow chart as part of that,
Agreed. Yeah, we can add that to future presentations, and I apologize that that's the portion I breezed over this evening in the interest of time.
Well, I have sort of a comment. You guys will remember, but way back when we looked at the CBA, I talked about the idea of putting more graphics into it, and also I talked about some of the issues I had with the data. And this is all very technical stuff. I realize it's not something we can digest. So I've got some handouts here that I'd like to give to everybody to look at, and to keep in mind as we move forward to get back. This especially has to do with the economic section of the CBA, which is where I had the problem. So I'm going to pass these out tonight. I've got a CD that I will give to Scott. It fell out of the pile in the car. For the public, to put it on the website so that everybody will have a copy of it.
I have two things. One is, and Bob, Dr. Teff just reminded me, as I recall from several months ago, there's still some information you owe us that's never been revised and given back to us. And I don't even remember the names of them anymore, but it was way back. And we were going to still revisit it, you were going to bring it back, and it's never happened. You were asking us to vote on it 2 different times in the agenda, and Dr. Teff took the lead, and we all agreed that we weren't going to approve it because it wasn't done. Was it correct?
I think it was the community baseline assessment and the key issues and policies.
Yeah, those CBA and the key issues. So, that never happened, as far as I know. And number 2, I asked you earlier on that we're going to respect the time, and when you ask us as volunteers to have another meeting to keep up, I don't mind doing that, but then when we run over anyway, that's a little frustrating. I think it's frustrating for the public to have to show up and we're not done. I just don't think it works.
I think our TV coverage ends right when the meeting's supposed to end too, doesn't it?
Well, no, normally we have a hard stop on this committee meeting because there's another board that meets right after us.
Yeah, but Scott, what I'm getting at is, yeah, hard stop, but we don't get to finish the agenda. This time we got to go through all the items on the agenda. Time before last, when I wasn't here last time, I was sick, but the time before, we just stopped and we didn't get to finish the agenda because we were out of time. I think you guys owe it to us to respect our time and give us the time that's on that agenda to be able to give our comments in the time frame that you've allotted from 4 to 6, if you're going to still, again, ask us for additional meetings too. I don't mind coming, but I ask you to respect our time.
I'm going to have to say I'm not really sure I understand what you're saying.
It's almost 10 after 6, and we're not done. We have a meeting that was posted for 4 to 6. We regularly do this.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I just misunderstood what you said. Okay.
But I'd still like, what I'm saying is that the time before, to make it at 6, you just cut us off. We didn't get to finish what we're having now and the rest of the agenda. We just cut it off.
I think the challenge, though, is that you do have public comment, and we're very respectful and and we want that. So you can't always predict. I mean, lately we've been having, 6, 8 people show up for public comment. That took a good 40 minutes today.
Yeah.
You don't want to cut that off. I just think we used to call it specific local lousy conditions. You can't really, we all have stuff to say.
My position is on that we need to be flexible. Normally you're going to have a hard stop, and the reason why it's put on there is because, we have a Recreation and Parks Commission that meets right after us. It just so happens, and I just looked and found out because they were supposed to have a meeting today, and then something happened and they're not having it. I didn't realize that was the case because last time I talked to the deputy city manager, they were going to be having a meeting and it didn't happen. So we could have potentially gone longer, but we would have noticed that ahead of time, but didn't find out about it. So.
This is a very complicated process, and I think we have to be a little flexible about this because these discussions have too many paths to take. And when they take some of those paths, they take time. So I'm okay with what we've done.
I mean, certainly when we ask you for additional meetings, if you're not available and think it's too much, you let us know. I mean, we're certainly not trying to force them on you. It's just we do have timelines that we're responsible for meeting, and so that's what we're trying to keep up with.
I agree.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of material that has to be covered, and there's certain points that have to be made, and that's just the way that's just life, Okay, so moving on to comments from staff or from the consultants.
I don't have anything, do you? No.
Have none?
I just wanted to say thanks because there were things that came up tonight that we haven't heard before, and that's why we're here. So, yeah.
Very good. Okay, with that then, we will adjourn to our next regularly scheduled meeting, which will be at the Veterans Hall here on March the 8th, 4 p.m. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.